welcome to this session of the DeFi Summit, focused on the role of digital art and NFTs in the cultural and creative industries. I'm Eathan Janney. I'm the co-host of the Edge of NFT podcast, and I'll be moderating this panel with three pioneers in the space of art, digital media, and NFTs, namely Matty Mo, of The Most Famous Artist, and Pplpleasr, as well as scholar Francis Liddell. Let's give a quick introduction for each of us, and then we'll jump right in. First, I'll introduce myself. I'm co-host of the Edge of NFT podcast, along with Jeff Kelly and Josh Krieger. Our podcast aims to bring you not only the top 1% of what's going on with NFTs today, but what will stand the test of time. We explore the nuts and bolts in the business side, but also the human element of how NFTs are changing the way we interact with the things that we love. It's a podcast for the futurists and dreamers, the disruptors and creators, the fans and connectors, and the makers and the doers that are pumped about this ecosystem of NFT and driving where it goes next. So appropriate for these themes, we'll be talking with our guests. I'll introduce Matty Mo. Matty is a New Mexico-based artist and entrepreneur best known for creating the social token-powered global community known as The Most Famous Artist. Together, they create large-scale headline-generating spectacles and are working on helping 10,000 artists achieve financial freedom independent of institutional gatekeepers. We also have Pplpleasr, a multidisciplinary artist based in NYC. Her work as a digital artist includes visual effects credits in commercials, Blizzard games cinematics, and feature films like Batman vs. Superman, Wonder Woman, and Star Trek Beyond. Pplpleasr the Pleasr DAO arose to fund the purchase of her Uniswap NFT. And finally, we have Francis Liddell. She's a PhD student in museum studies at the University of Manchester. She's working on a project with the National Museums of Liverpool that explores how we might implement NFTs in museums to create a sense of connection and shared guardianship. Her interests include internet culture, digital heritage, open access policies, and blockchain technology. So I'd like to launch right into our conversation here with something for Matty. And what I want to do is touch upon the fact that your background is in tech entrepreneurship and marketing, and you're somewhat of an outsider artist. I want to know, how have you noticed that your attitudes about in relationship to NFTs differ in contrast to more traditional members of the art world?
Well, Eathan, thanks for having us on the stage today, and it's a thrill to be here with you all. I think the traditional art world is still trying to figure out what the heck to do with NFTs. And being that I had a bit of a background in technology, once I kind of got beyond the big ticket sales of digital art and the confusion of what NFTs are and looked under the hood, I realized that the technology is quite powerful and quite liberating. And so I guess I'm relatively optimistic that the artists using NFTs now are going to greatly grow their careers, and those that will come on board a little bit later will realize that NFTs are the future, and they can have a big impact on the traditional art world.
And when you say it's kind of liberating for artists, what have you seen? Are there any specific instances? I know your collective has generated a few interesting projects around this. Anything you find particularly liberating?
Yeah, so in some cases, artists don't have access to markets. For example, there's artists in our collective from Peru or Iran, and they wouldn't necessarily be able to sell to a global network of collectors, particularly because digital files traditionally couldn't be sold, and shipping internationally is quite difficult. So NFTs have provided them an income stream for their work and allowed them to become a little bit more confident that their practice matters, and to gain resources that allowed them to continue their practice.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I also remembered in preparation for this session, we were wanting to have some fun, and you referred me to the, the WikiHow article on having fun. I actually didn't get to take a look at that, but hopefully you did, and we'll try to bring some fun into this session where possible.
Awesome.
All right.
Awesome.
Next, I'd like to move things over to Pplpleasr. You've been up to some really impressive stuff. I really appreciate your art and your sophistication within the space. I'd like to get your perspective on how digital art and NFTs have been integrated with the new financial system growing out of blockchain technology. Historically, financial and art worlds might not have been as closely linked in terms of interests and interactivity. Would you agree with me that that is a new trend? And if so, is it here to stay? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, first, thanks for having me on. And I think definitely they have a sort of closer relationship now than they did before, especially with myself being sort of more embedded in the DeFi community. I think a lot of people are now starting to realize that you can use NFTs as financial assets, which wasn't sort of like a concept that was circulating in just the traditional art world, I don't think. And so I think that's, it's not just, I think a lot of people, when we say NFTs, they're just thinking about, selling just an artwork or something. But, I'm talking about even things in the metaverse or like Axie Infinity, for example. These are actually an NFT surrounded projects that are even helping people, for example, in the Philippines, generate income. And so this is something that hasn't happened previously. And I think definitely is sort of pushing us towards like a new model where people can sort of generate income. And then also because needing to understand crypto, there is a little bit higher of a barrier to entry right now. And so people wanting to sell NFTs, mint NFTs, need to understand crypto anyway, how to use MetaMask and wallet, things like this. And then so because of the worlds are so closely colliding, this sometimes brings them to understand DeFi and other technologies in crypto as well. And so I think that kind of sort of movement in general is really empowering artists and then helping them take more control into their own finances, which wasn't previously as sort of easy as a process. And yeah, I think it's great.
Cool. Yeah. You mentioned being like kind of feeling, I think you said like integrated into the DeFi community. And then from what you said, it almost seemed like I don't know, it's like a chain reaction of sorts that happens with folks. They get into one thing and then it requires this and then they have to research that. And so they sort of get integrated. Is that your story, or is it more you had friends in the space, you already had a personal interest in these things?
I think definitely I was already sort of interested in cryptocurrency since 2017, or not just interested, but I was holding and purchasing crypto since 2017. But obviously with when DeFi summer exploded, I think specifically the community surrounding DeFi are very, very internet centric, and crypto Twitter in general, and their sense of humor and just really aligns with my own. And so I just really resonated with the entire vibe of the community. And then so I started basically making these animations that, I think also the meme culture I really resonated with as well. And then I noticed that, a large part of the marketing and sort of just passing on information is done through memes in the space, which I personally think is really awesome. And then so I saw this opportunity to sort of bring those memes to the next level by combining my previous skill set with digital art and creating sort of like these higher quality meme-like videos that can help, that carry a sense of virality and also help spread information even faster. And then so I started collaborating with a bunch of these DeFi protocols. But obviously to make content around this information, you need to understand it first. So that's where I started doing a lot of research around the different DeFi protocols and how they work, and also gives me a better understanding of financial models as well, because a lot of them actually migrate from traditional, or not migrate, but are sort of innovated from traditional finance models. And then I wasn't really very knowledgeable in traditional finance before, but now I'm a little bit more because of DeFi, and also that it helps me learn about investing as well.
Yeah, I mean, I really appreciate this movement as someone, who's been a musician and in the art world since, 2000s, and my friends weren't actually that were musicians. I was in a band, for example. None of them were really interested in finance at all. But for some reason, I had a little bit of an interest in, finance and business and things like that. And I felt like a bit of an outsider. So I'm really appreciating this movement where, arts are being integrated with finance. And there's some, like you said, some fun, some humor included there. And like you said, Matty, a real opportunity for the artists to achieve the independence and freedom that they've often hoped for in the past. Francis, I'd like to go over to you. I know you're working closely with museums to invent the ways that NFT technology will integrate with the institutions that have supported art consumption traditionally. How has this been evolving? Do you have any experiences you can share, movements you've seen, obstacles you've encountered with the things you're working on?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think it's safe to say that 2021 has been the year that museums are starting to finally take note of NFTs. And I think perhaps the pandemic was a big kickstart of it, because a lot of museums are kind of looking at it from a fundraising aspect and thinking about, okay, can we use NFTs to create extensions of the digital collection and start selling them and start a new digital income, whilst, for example, everyone can't come to the physical space. And I think there is a lot of value in that. But my research is really interested in kind of looking at it from a kind of more community engagement prospect. So how can we use NFTs beyond the monetary context and use them to kind of create emotional connections between a person and a digital collection? And yeah, so to give you some context, my research started back in 2018, kind of the end of the last blockchain hype, so to speak. And yeah, we were kind of interested looking at, okay, can we use these things to kind of diversify narratives in museums and thinking about kind of using the digital object as kind of a kind of new form of value, so to speak. So we basically got a group of participants together to choose an object from the museum that they loved and had an emotional connection to, and we essentially made them into NFTs for them. And each NFT has their kind of personal story embedded into the metadata. And we call it kind of a personal edition. And it's sort of the idea of like, can this then forge new connections between these people and the museum? And can we use this in kind of spaces where museums are already working with communities and objects have lots of different stories attached to it, rather than just the kind of one singular narrative, often just told in collections. So yeah, I think although fundraising is a really important aspect, I think my research is really ultimately about looking at, okay, well, I think there's much more to the museum NFT than simply money. And, museums have always been part of kind of, it's so much more than art. We add interpretation, we add social cohesion, we add education. So let's kind of start adding those different forms of value into the NFT space as well.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, it seems like the central piece around NFTs is just ownership in general, right? And like you said, attaching a monetary value to the ownership is one thing that we do, but especially in the art and creative worlds, there's maybe always been a push to not attach monetary value to things, to kind of look beyond monetary value. So I can really appreciate that perspective of saying you could even use an NFT to just attach a person, attach their soul, their self-interest, their personal connection to an art object or something that they care about. So that's very interesting. Now, just in the details of what you're talking about. So somebody picks an object from the museum that's special to them. That's a physical object, right?
Yeah, so this was actually a workshop that took place way back pre-pandemic, like sort of January 2020, I think. And yeah, we basically invited people to look at the collection and choose an object based on their kind of personal relationship to it. And we basically built kind of an online exhibition that we call Crypto Connections, which you can see on the National Museums Liverpool website. And yeah, if you go on there, you'll see that basically there's the object that they chose with this kind of personal summary written by the participant about basically why they chose it and what's their kind of personal connection. And kind of the kind of technical side of it was really so we could then have this online information that we could then turn into NFTs, which we did so kind of with a kind of, we created a decentralized gallery and yeah, used to kind of build a smart contract connected Ethereum blockchain. And yeah, so we called that the possession gallery as well. So these tokens kind of represent they're kind of literally kind of extensions of the collection, but are not owned by the museum. So yeah, it's about kind of bringing that sense of shared authority as well.
Right. And the individuals, again, these are individuals that are more consumers of the art, right, or participants in the art than the makers. But then I guess they've sort of become a little bit of a maker by choosing these things. And then the objects that now have the blockchain ownership attached to them, have they been assigned a monetary value? Are they tradable, or is it just that they're owned by the people who created them? How does that work? Just curious.
Yeah, well, they could technically sell them if they wanted to. They could go onto OpenSea and put them onto for sale. My argument would be that they wouldn't because of the personal relationship to it. But yeah, there's nothing to stop them. And also that's kind of the thing I really wanted to challenge the museum about, is thinking, well, we talk about shared authority and, you know, this sense of kind of connection and letting people, you know, have some sense of ownership over collections. Well, this can literally take that whole idea to a whole new level with blockchain, because they literally own something that they could sell and the museum has literally no control over that. But yeah, hopefully they won't.
Yeah. I mean, I think I'd love to move it, you know, we're welcome at this point to kind of open it up a little bit. So if anybody has any thoughts based on what everyone else said, feel free to jump in here. One thing that I'm thinking of that's bringing to mind here is we've kind of talked about the value side of things on both ends. You know, there's the monetary value, and then there's sort of the non-monetary value of the connections that are made and the ownership that's created. And then there's this traditional narrative within the art world of the starving artist. You know, there's the book that many people may be familiar with, The Gift, which talks all about how, you know, artists kind of feel like they've been gifted their talents and experiences, and they all feel very just sort of intuitively resistant towards accepting money and compensation for them. But then at the same time, we have people in this group who have, you know, found ways to monetize their art and, you know, not be afraid to do that. And you know, again, it can become a matter of survival. It's really important for artists to consider, you know, how they're going to continue to be able to make their art. Matty, like I noticed there's a theme in what you do of sort of trying to assist with that, right? Trying to assist the artists in the art world with that. What have been your experiences? Have you encountered those that are resistant still, even though you're trying to help them, to sort of monetizing things? And kind of what have you found? Have you found any secrets to kind of like moving past those barriers and using blockchain and NFT as a means to move forward?
Sure. The projects that me and the community that I'm stewarding have had the most success with have been these kind of like large scale collaborative drops, where we can showcase a broad range of talent and use best in class kind of mechanics for the drops, and align with the like fast moving zeitgeist of the internet, but appeal to the crypto class's aesthetic and cultural sensibilities. And in doing so, we can actually help everyone make a little bit more money. We can help everyone sell through their work by coming together and creating a cohesive body of work. We as a community of artists stand stronger than us individually distributing our work. And there's also this like built-in virality and distribution and working in large pods of artists for these types of collaborations. And because we don't have to physically ship works to create these group shows, they become way more accessible to a larger pool of talent. And so I've seen a lot of success with that. And we've now done a drop that's a portrait of people. We've done a drop that's a portrait of Elon. We've done a drop that's a portrait of Grimes, where artists in our community remix these to create almost a collection or a series of collectibles. And I see more and more of that happening. I think we're in like the first pitch of the first inning of NFTs though. There's so much exciting stuff happening with like Oracle data making NFTs more dynamic, and the capacity through which NFTs can be used for fundraising or humanitarian efforts. Those are the things I'm most excited about moving forward. But I think Pplpleasr kind of nailed it. It's like we as the leaders of NFT art do have to keep in mind that our customers are the crypto class, and they have particular cultural and aesthetic sensibilities. And that's going to largely define what kind of work gets produced and has success in this market.
That's interesting. Yeah, on our podcast, we had the artist Vesa, who is relatively successful and established within the NFT space, for whatever that means. Within the relatively few short years that it's been around. But he actually highlighted something maybe slightly different. That yes, like this moment right now can be very focused on who are the class that are interested at this moment in time, and they tend to be technologically educated and care about what's in their world of finance and decentralized finance and so forth. Now, you was kind of predicting that the interesting projects that are going to stick around in long term are going to be more well established in the historical tradition of art. And so he has like an obsession with ancient Egyptian art, right? And he's kind of thinking about the art historical progression of things. I don't know. I mean, Pplpleasr, I would say you're you probably have spent some time in the traditional art world within your training, just maybe even as a person growing up and becoming an artist and wanting to just draw and work on physical objects. Do you have any perspectives on that?
I think it's silly to gatekeep between traditional and the new technological world. I mean, we're all humans at the end of the day, and art is subjective. And when I say that, it's not necessarily, I mean, you can see my Uniswap piece. There's obviously a lot of explanations behind it on why it's linked to crypto or, the specific like Uniswap V3 mechanics and stuff. But I also, reference like Miyazaki, Princess Mononoke films, and like just traditional anime and just whatever influences my personal art style. And then also I did take influence from medieval tapestries as well. So I think it's really silly to say one would succeed more than the other. The most important thing is just rallying a community that are loyal to you. Chris Dixon from Andreessen Horowitz wrote a really, really good article called NFTs and 1,000 True Fans. And basically, I think that what it's saying is just that you don't need to have, 1 million fans. You can see this today too with people who are successful in the traditional art sense or whatever that means. And they could have, 2 million fans on Instagram, but that doesn't translate one-to-one over, you can see them drop an NFT. It's probably not going to do that well. And the reason being that their fan base are maybe not people at this moment who use crypto and are interested in NFTs. So it's all about just finding a community that works for you. And the one that I personally resonate with is in decentralized finance, but that's just part of who I was growing up as well, and it's not anything to do with decentralized finance. It's just this community of people who share this internet culture and our love for memes and, like sense of humor, things like this. And so, yeah, I think it's really silly to sort of say like one is better than the other. I think everyone has their own sort of community and people that they resonate with. And at the end of the day, even from like, Egyptian art, that's what it's about too. It resonates with people who like Egyptian art, so just find your own people and you'll be fine.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I definitely appreciate that perspective. I mean, especially from the creator, I think it's very tempting for creators to try to become, and I'm noticing before I even say this, like because of your name, and I don't even know what the history of that, unfortunately, but like please everyone, right? Like an artist might want to please the masses, and that's where they direct their things. And it's pretty clear, on that along those lines of the Kevin Kelly 1,000 True Fans aesthetic and philosophy, that's not the way, right? The way is to find who you connect with. At the same time, that makes me think of this sort of cautionary tale around social media and people becoming siloed into their communities and like not understanding each other and not being willing to communicate. So, I mean, I think the way you present it, it doesn't feel dangerous, just feels exciting, and it feels, enriching, and it feels celebratory towards like people's individual cultures. But that is something I wonder about. Francis, what have having worked in museums, which tend to be probably try to be something that's more attracting a mass appeal. Do you have an opinion on this, or directions that you particularly are participating in?
Yeah, I mean, I've been thinking about this. I mean, the question of audience has been something that I've talked to a few museums about who are kind of looking at entering into the NFT space, because there is no real kind of cross section between the crypto world and the typical museum goer. I mean, there will be, but there's, generally speaking, they're quite different kind of communities. And if museums are kind of thinking about, okay, let's sell some works as NFTs, it's like, well, okay, well, who are you selling it to? Are you trying to gain that kind of traditional audience and try and move them into the blockchain kind of sphere? Or are you going into the crypto world? And if so, are you ready for that space? Because I don't think a lot of institutions are. They're very controlling, they're very risk averse. They're probably not ready for something that's incredibly decentralized and unknown. On the other end of the spectrum, it's then how do you kind of move this kind of audience who might be quite, scared of blockchain? That was kind of a number of times some of my participants said, like, I don't know what blockchain is. I'm scared of it. I don't want to use it. And you're like, okay, you don't have to. And it's kind of finding that kind of interlink, which is why I kind of go back to that question of like personal connection. It's finding, I mean, as Pplpleasr says, it's like finding that kind of niche market and finding that group of people that kind of relate so close to the art that it doesn't really matter about the technology at the end of the day. And it's just more about kind of the meaning behind it. But yeah, I think audience it's an interesting one. It's an interesting question.
Yeah. Also, like, Matty, most specifically, you kind of think of yourself as an outsider artist. And then that's like outside of what, right? You're an insider artist to the type of community that you want to relate to and build with, like Pplpleasr outlined. And so I'm curious, Pplpleasr, do you ever consider yourself either an outsider or insider artist in any particular communities? Elucidating a little bit more on what you already said.
I think similarly to the traditional art world, I really sort of don't like to be continuing to use these terms because, at the end of the day, I think it's akin to saying—
That's why I asked you just insider, outsider.
I think it's akin to saying like, oh, only Mozart is successful and then modern music is not, or even just saying music music that has moved on to Spotify or, new streaming. Let's say when Spotify first came out, this is the same thing, right? People using like a CD player to listen to music versus like listening to it on Spotify and saying, oh, people who listen to Spotify music are different from people. I think it's just, we're just going through a transition phase right now and has purely to do with technology and not the art itself. And at the end of the day, art is subjective, just like music and all other forms of art. But to answer your question, I do think that originally, similar to the traditional art world, when sort of these curated NFT platforms first came out, like Super Rare, Nifty Gateway, there was a lot of gatekeeping going on.
Oh, we're getting a thumbs down from
Matty. That is very, very
about the
similar
gatekeeping, or
yeah.
Wait. Yeah, got it. I just wanted to make sure we knew what that was about.
It's very, very similar to the traditional art world, where it's not necessarily based on how much talent or technical skill you have, and I'm pretty sure mainly they were just looking at how many Instagram followers you had, and I mean, which is fine, because at the end of the day, if you're trying to curate something, you need some metric to show. And if somebody had previously spent a lot of time building up a community, let's say on Instagram for digital art, it does show some merit to either a lot of people liking their work, or marketing yourself is a skill on its own, right? And so in that sense, definitely I consider myself an outsider, because my socials are quite new. I didn't create neither my Instagram or Twitter profiles. They're only like a year old, and my Twitter's like less than a year old basically. And so, I started with 0 followers. And then so obviously when I was trying to get into these platforms, they were just like, who is this? You're nobody. And I don't think they wanted to let me sell anything. But then, I found a way to sort of rally my own community, and then I made one really big sale, and then now everybody's like, come sell your art here. So I think it's really just sort of, we're moving towards a new paradigm right now. And I mean, what I love about crypto or the crypto community is that, for example, there's a lot of anonymous people on there, and they really just sort of reward people who put out good work. And it's less about, who you are, what you look like, who you're connected to. And this applies to not just artists, but also copywriters and developers, builders, creators in general. And you can really see that it's sort of like a reset where, as long as you're doing good stuff, I think the community won't hesitate to sort of reward you and prop you up. And I really appreciate that. And obviously I saw that happen with myself as well. So whether you're an insider or outsider, I think as long as you're doing good work and within this space, people will notice.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, I reflect upon this often. I think, there's a reason that those like movies about being like a high school kid that's misunderstood are relatively popular, and they keep remaking them because, in a sense, we all don't feel like we have a tribe at some point in life. It's usually at some point within the high school in our development years. And then it's not that we're an outsider, we just feel like it until we find that tribe, and I think at least that's part of, I did a music project. It was called Daily Wiki Music, and it was a daily Wikipedia song that I wrote and published every day back in like 2009 based on the Wikipedia article of the day. And I don't know whether there would be a tribe around that particular project, but I have to say I crave it. So, but there are probably people out there that for each of us as artists that we'll find and can resonate with what we do, and it's just a matter of patience and actually taking the time to look. So we are at about 5 minutes out for the end of this session, so I want to make sure we wrap it up on time. I guess what I'd really like to do is make sure we have an opportunity for each of you, to kind of give the viewers something to take away, to look for with what you're doing that you think might be interesting or valuable to them. So let's make sure we take some time for them. I'll start with Matty Mo. So for people who are watching, if they want to find out more about what you're doing, what do you think is the best path, and what would you like them to take away from the session?
Well, I'm currently working on a course with a platform called Maven on how to crush it with NFTs, and it's going to be 100% zero risk to anyone who's interested in taking the course. So you take the course, and we're going to do a community drop, and ideally that drop will cover your tuition costs, and if it doesn't, I will refund you. So I'm so confident in the power of NFTs, and I do believe that NFTs are for everybody, and I do believe in the power of community. So take a look at my website, The Most Famous Artist, and join that conversation and that course if you're interested in figuring out how to crush it with NFTs. That's my shill.
Awesome. Let's move over to Pplpleasr. What should people do to find out more about you? What would you like them to take away from the session today?
I think just sort of not neglecting technical skill, being a good person, and also I think when you start making money from NFTs, if it's if you have any extra, don't forget to give to a good cause. That's my shill. And then also that check out Pplpleasr DAO. It is sort of a DAO that was formed specifically, and I think obviously DAOs are like a hot topic right now. So if people want to sort of like get involved, you can look into how to like make your own DAO. I mean, I didn't make Pplpleasr DAO, but I am an honorary member now, and they're building really cool stuff. And then they're always looking to sort of flip and onboard new artists as well. And so and they're also looking into like fractionalization of NFTs, and also combining DeFi with NFTs as well, with like concepts like staking art, and then you can get interest or farm tokens with that. Really interesting and cool stuff. So feel free to check out what Pplpleasr DAO is doing.
Awesome. Yeah, very exciting stuff. Francis, what about you? Where can people go to find out more about what you're doing, and what would you like them to take away from the session?
Yeah, so I write a lot about kind of the intersection between NFTs and museums. Post a lot of that on my LinkedIn and Twitter, so you can find more about kind of the research I've been doing there. But the thing I'd really want people to take away is to kind of think more about kind of the meaning behind NFTs, and not simply just to mint things for the sake of minting it, but think about the process that you're doing. And particularly for kind of museums and institutions, it's kind of, there's so much more value that we can attribute to an NFT. So yeah, I think that's the thing. Go ahead and go start experimenting and start thinking about kind of how you can embed it into your own practices.
Great. Appreciate that. Yeah, wonderful diversity of perspectives here. Great conversation. Thanks for bringing up, objections and conflicts where appropriate to make for a rousing discussion. Appreciate that from everyone here. So I guess with that, we'll wrap it up and just make sure that people go and enjoy the rest of the conference. There's a lot of great stuff going on. Again, I'm Eathan Janney of the Edge of NFT podcast, and you've been spending this half hour with Matty Mo, Pplpleasr, and Francis Liddell.